Hello, Chris Godinez, licensed professional counselor, also the host of We Need to Talk on every Sunday at noon, and then I post this stuff up to social media. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. The views and opinions stated herein are mine and mine alone. They do not represent the ACA, the APA, or any other therapist for that matter. Boom shakalaka done. I'd like to thank my sponsor, BetterHelp, BetterHelp, betterhelp.com/Chris Godinez. They're an online therapy company. They are international. I've had really good feedback from people using them. They do packages that are very affordable, packages of like 4 sessions. Awesome. So thank you, betterhelp.com/Chris Godinez. Okay. So the question today is, been diagnosed with PTSD, CPTSD, but have had so much trauma from having been to psychologists that didn't understand. Would hiring a coach be advisable? If so, what type of coach, and how to be certain that they can help? So I've said this before, I'll say it again. No matter who you're going to, whether it is a life coach, whether it is a therapist, whether it is a psychologist, whether it is a psychiatrist, you want to make sure that it's a good fit. And you want to ask them all kinds of questions, like seriously. And they should not mind that. If you come across somebody whose ego is obviously running the show and they're like, oh, how dare you ask me these questions, then you can be like, how dare you be in my business? You know, it's like, how dare you be in this business? You should be able to be asked questions. So be careful of how they respond. If they're like defensive, that is not the therapist for you, or the life coach, or the whatever. So you want to ask questions like, how do you know about trauma? Have you been through trauma yourself and then made it to the other side? Is that how you are doing this, And people who've been there are willing to say, yeah, absolutely. This is, I wrote a whole book about it. My family was crazy and, this kind of thing. If they haven't been through their own trauma and they're only trauma informed, which drives me crazy. It's like trauma informed. Okay, you've heard of trauma. Big whoop. I want to make sure you know what you're doing. So you ask them, it's like, where's your training? How are you informed about trauma? Did you study Bessel van der Kolk? Did you study Dr. Ramani? Did you study Frank Anderson? Did you study, who's your mentors? Where have you learned about this stuff? That kind of thing. So don't be afraid ever to ask questions. It's like anyone can say that they're trauma informed. I've seen therapists go, oh yeah, I know about anxiety. Oh yeah, I know. And then you start talking to them and you're like, you don't know your a-hole from a hole in the ground, do you? So you want to make sure that whoever you get with, whether it is a therapist, whether it is a life coach, whether it is a psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever, that they know what they're talking about and what their experience is with it. Who trained them? What theories are they going off of? Who do they listen to, or who taught them about trauma? That will tell you a great deal. So, it's really important to do that, especially if they haven't gone through trauma themselves and it's all academic. That's great. You can read about it, but I'm telling you, experience is the best teacher. So anyway, the point being is it a good idea if you have trauma from having gone to therapists that didn't know about trauma? Yeah, I still think that some help is better than no help at all. Unless, of course, you get with a therapist that doesn't know about trauma and, that kind of thing. So you really want to make sure you want to interview them. It's like, what is your experience with trauma? What caused you to go into... That's why I asked Marsha Diane that on Sunday. It's like, well, what caused you to start focusing in on this? Well, she's been through it, been there, done that, bought the playbook, decided never to do it again. Same thing with me. It's like family history. Hello, been there, done that, realized I could help people. So you want to find out what makes them tick in a way. It's like, why are you in this particular, why are you saying you're trauma informed? What led you to this? What's your training? Who are your mentors? Whose books do you read? What's your theoretical orientation, So you want to ask all of those questions. Is it worth it? Yeah, I think it is. I think a bad therapist is worse than no therapist. But you can do a lot of the work by working workbooks, absolutely. If you've had such a bad experience with therapists that you just don't even want to give it a shot again, you can do a lot with workbooks. It just helps to have somebody to bounce stuff off of. It really does. So, is it advisable to go with a life coach? Yeah, but it's got to be somebody that has been there, done that, and or has trained with Dr. Ramani, Frank Anderson, Bessel van der Kolk, that kind of thing, or reads their books or goes to their seminars or whatever, so that they're not just, oh, I'm trauma informed, and they actually aren't. So, yeah, you want to ask a lot of questions and don't ever feel ashamed of doing that. Now, some therapists, I've seen them do it. When you ask them questions, when you really start challenging, it's like, well, where did you learn this? Or how did you learn this? Or whatever. They get super defensive. And to me, that is kind of like, okay, here's your sign. That is not a good thing. They should be open, they should be honest, they should be transparent, and they should let you know. It's like, this is how I know about this stuff. This is my, my orientation. This is, I've gone to multiple seminars and CEUs and XXXYYYZZZ, about how to help people with trauma. So, yeah, don't be afraid to ask, and don't just give up. Are there a lot of bad therapists out there? Hell yeah, there are. There are so many, oh dear Lord, people out there that I look at them and I go, please leave my profession. Just do everyone a favor. Get out of the profession. Thank you. So, but there are also good therapists out there, and the good therapists will not mind being asked questions. I don't hate it. I'm not hateful when somebody asks me questions. I'm not defensive when somebody asks me questions. And sure, here's where I got my master's degree, and here's where I got my BA, and here's where I've learned all of this, and this is what I've studied, and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because people have a right to know that, and you have a right to ask. So don't ever be afraid of asking hard questions. So we do get traumatized when a therapist or a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a life coach or whatever does not understand trauma, really does not understand narcissistic abuse. Yeah, we do get damaged when that happens, 100%. But here's the thing, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. If you realize that one therapist is no bueno, fire them. You have the right to fire them. You do. And find a therapist that you like, that you can relate to, and that understands narcissistic abuse. It gets domestic violence. So generally, if you find a therapist that specializes in domestic violence, you're going to find one that understands trauma. Generally. Now, that doesn't mean all of them, but generally they're not the ones that are like, oh, trauma informed. They're like, no, I work with domestic violence targets. I do. That's who I am. That's what I do. So, but you do always want to ask the questions. It's like, well, what is your training in this? Who did you train with? Who do you admire in this field? What is your modality? That kind of thing. So it's always a good idea to, not give up on hope and not give up on help. There are good therapists out there, but you do have to weed them out by asking really hard questions. So let me make sure I got everything. Okay, when we've been diagnosed with PTSD, CPTSD, but have too much trauma from having been to psychologists that didn't understand, would hiring a coach be advisable? I would say yeah. It's like, look, how do I explain? If one thing is not working, try something else. There's really, the worst that can happen is you get with a life coach and they don't understand and you fire them. Again, you fire them. So, but I think working on things, kind of tiptoeing your way around into working on the abuse can be helpful. So like Marsha was talking about on Sunday about, maybe working on the spiritual aspect of it, maybe getting yourself comfortable in your own body, maybe, learning how to relax, learning how to deal with the symptoms of PTSD, CPTSD. Maybe that's a good way to kind of ease into, okay, now we're into the meat and potatoes, and now I need a therapist to work on the psychological parts of it. So, yeah, here's the thing. It's so funny to me. So many therapists are like, oh, life coaches. Oh, and I'm just like, look, I don't give a damn what path the client takes as long as it gets them there. If it gets them to where they need to go, huzzah. Huzzah. It's not a competition. As long as they're competent and they're not harming the client, physician do no harm, then there's nothing wrong with life coaches. So, but interview them like you would anybody else. That would be my thing. All right. So that is that for today. On Sunday, we're going to talk about loneliness and how not to fall into the trap of getting in your head and then deciding that your being not lonely depends on somebody else. No, it depends on you. We're going to talk about that. So, all right, you guys, have a great week, and I will talk to you on Sunday. Bye.